Good evening, everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome to the Abyss. Now that Spooktober is over, we're just going to jump into happy, fun content. Try to make everybody laugh.
Yeah, we're a comedy podcast now.
Bring your children along. It'll be fun.
Bring your kids, your wife. Bring them all.
Your grandparents. Bring everybody. It's fun for the whole family. What are you drinking, Cleet?
I'm drinking Maximus Colossal IPA. It's 9%.
Colossal IPA. What's the brewer?
It's Linguinas.
Lagunitas?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. That's like a noodle?
It's Linguinas. It's Linguini.
It's the Linguinis.
There's literally little bits of pasta in there. That's how you know it's good.
Hey, you got the authentic stuff.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm drinking Planet Utah. It's a double India Pale Ale from Silver Reef Brewing Co. It's got a little alien on it. He's poured himself a pint of beer.
Seems regular. Just a regular day at the bar.
Oh, yeah. How was trick-or-treating with your son, man?
It was fun, man. I went and put some candy in a big bowl on my porch. We left for 30 minutes and came back, and it was all gone. Somebody robbed me. I'm sure
it was the first kid, too. He's like, fuck yeah, man.
Yeah.
This house rocks.
There was like 3 Kit Kats left. So I got raided for sure. I was not happy about it.
So you're one of those people, it's like, oh, just help yourselves and hope it lasts.
I guess I should have left a note that said, please take one. That would have changed things.
Oh, yeah. Easily.
Oh, you can eat.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you can eat.
It's called Cleet's Buffet of Chocolate. Let's do it. Yeah. I stayed home because my wife took the kids out and I was like passing out the candy at our house. And every kid that came up, how many? How many? How many? It's like, take one, dude. Take a couple. I don't care. You just got some kids that just stuck their whole hand in there taking handfuls. It's like, oh my God, dude. Like,
you know what you should have done? You should have like looked left and right and then be like, hey kid, you know, like 3 streets down, the blue house, full-size candy bars. And then he's going to be looking for that for the rest of the night just to fuck with him.
Yeah. I'd just be like, hey, they're handing out 2 king size per kid.
King size. It's
king size.
It's crazy.
You ever been to Costco? Yeah, that size. 2 of them per kid.
Hershey's was pissed because they ran out of chocolate bars.
Well, what are we talking about?
Well, tonight we'll be going over a Reddit thread called Outdoorsmen of Reddit. What is the most terrifying experience you've encountered in the woods?
Ooh. You know what we should do for our next video, Cleet? We should just go out to a remote, deep section of the woods and just sit for a weekend.
We should do a live stream.
Hey, live stream in the woods.
Elon's got that technology where you can just get one of those little like iPad things and you can have like internet anywhere because it's satellite. We can live stream in the woods.
Let's do it. Let's make it happen. Dead of winter. Dead middle of the woods. Live streaming in the forest. We would be the 2 idiots that found Bigfoot and no one would fucking believe us.
I'm Bigfoot.
All right, well, let's jump into some creepy stories from the woods. All right, I'll start. This one comes from Jubstep45. Walking in the pitch black out to a deer stand, so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Heard some circling around me of something large. It was trotting along. No big deal, figured it was a deer. Then it stopped and let out the most bone-chilling howl that I have ever heard. So loud, it was like it was inside of me. A few wolves howled back in the distance and it ran off. Needless to say, I needed some new underwear.
Now, I've never, soiled myself out of fear. You know, it's a saying. I'm sure it happens. It's never happened to me yet. All right.
Yeah. I was going to say, I know you shit yourself. Everybody shit themselves. But out of fear, no way.
Yeah.
No way.
All right, this one is from a worldly salamander. I was backwoods camping in Canada with my ex, deep in the forest. We'd been there all day or two and hadn't seen anyone. That evening, we were in the tent playing cards and heard something in the bushes, making a giant racket. It was getting steadily closer. It got to the area where we were in and stopped. We debated on what to do, but finally opened the tent, both completely freaked out, and found chickens. 3 chickens en route home to an organic farm we didn't know was nearby. So I guess some chickens spooked the hell out of them.
Yeah, you know, those wild chickens can be something, man. All right, this comes from Push the Button Frank. Summer 2020. I took my kid on a mother-daughter road trip. We were mostly camping for social distance reasons and because it's kind of our thing that nobody else in the family is interested in doing with us. We'd been driving for almost 10 hours at this point and had finally managed to find a halfway decent, unoccupied backcountry site, roughly a fourth of a mile off the road, in a section of a Sequoia National Forest way up near a mountain summit. We were probably only 2 miles from the nearest ranger station, but a long helicopter away from any medical facility. A little before sunset, I started hearing twigs that were snapping. Large twigs, more like medium-sized branches, were being stepped on and broken. Then I heard it again from the opposite direction about 10 minutes later. It became pretty clear that something large was circling nearby, so I calmly suggested to my daughter that we were going to go hang out in the tent and just listen to our favorite podcast on my phone, something called Enter the Abyss.
I don't think that's true.
That's not true.
Yeah.
To get away from the mosquitoes, actually to try to give the impression that there were more adult humans with us and at least put one barrier between us and whatever was out there. Finally, just before dusk, I heard the movement of something heavy that was definitely located between our tent and our vehicle. So I mustered the courage to go out with a flashlight and investigate, because that's when I realized I had left our only weapon, a large hunting knife, in the trunk of the car. It was fucking cows. Apparently some local rancher had permission to graze his cattle in that area. There you go. So chicken and cows, man. Fucking farm animals are just terrorizing people in the woods.
For any of our viewers, I'm really curious, do cows ever get stolen?
Yeah, by aliens.
No, someone just you imagine stealing an entire cow? It's gonna be worth $2,500 at least. Anyways, this one is from With This Account, I Can. When I was about 15 years old, me and some friends decided to go camping at a nearby lake. It was a 3 to 4 hour hike, and the nearest house was maybe 3 hours away. We brought some homemade wine and drank the whole night and ate poorly grilled hot dogs. Life was good. We all shared the tent, so it was crowded as fuck in the tent, but we all fell asleep around 2 a.m. At 4, I wake up because I can feel someone running their hands down my forearm. It's gonna be Bigfoot, guaranteed.
Bow, wow, wow, wow.
Not that unlikely that someone brushes up against me, since there wasn't any space to move around in a crowded tent. But this is the arm that is facing the tent. So, someone touched me from the outside of the tent. I sit up and get instantly horrified to see that all my friends are sound asleep in the tent with me. I put on my deepest voice and shout, "Whoever the fuck you are, you need to leave."
Whoever you are, get out of here.
This is my regular voice.
This is me lowering my voice. Actually, I'm raising it. It's much more deeper than this normally.
And a manly, low voice answers me, "You should pack up your stuff and leave."
Oh, damn.
Not threatening or aggressive, just calmly and in a dead kind of way. By now, all my friends are awake and are just looking at me. No words, just pure horror in their eyes. I say, "Okay, we will go, but you need to leave." See, his voice went higher.
Hurry up.
When we get out of the tent, this man, who is fucking huge by the way, has taken a little rowboat that was laying at the bank and gotten into it and is just sitting in the middle of the lake and watching us pack up our stuff and trying to get the fuck away ASAP.
What? He's just floating in the middle of the lake,
You better leave.
rowing in circles.
We had to walk around the lake to our way back, and he was just sitting there, watching us. We never went back. Puts edit for some context. This was 17 years ago in a rural Scandinavian country. We have a free-to-roam law, so we were not trespassing. We knew our way around the small town we grew up. Everybody knows everybody. There have been no missing people and or found dead. There has never been murders in generations. We told our parents, who at first tried to calm us down, and they said that we were probably overreacting. But the way he caressed my arm before he told us to go was not normal.
You better pack up and leave, pretty boy.
It's kinda When we told them everything and what he told us, we were told never to go back. After COVID, we all met up and the subject came up and we tried to do some digging. There are no houses or cabins anywhere near. The lake is way too small to fish in. When he was sitting dead center in his little boat, there was maybe 60 feet to the land on all sides. No one has ever seen this man before or after. So, creepy guy in a boat, caressing people's arms while they sleep.
Some say that he's still rowing away in that same lake.
Caressing
People's arms.
That's a really fine forearm you got there.
This is from Oksu 2. Many years ago, when I was about 14, I was hiking deep in the woods behind my house with some friends. We were miles away from home, further than any of us had ever gone before, and we came up to the edge of a clearing, and a little further down the tree line, we saw a lump of clothing underneath an old deer stand. We got a little closer, and we could make out legs and arms and boots. They were wet from rain and had been there for a while. Obviously, our first thought was that it was a hunter who had an accident and had fallen out of his stand and was dead. We were freaked out, and it took us a little bit of time to get the nerves to get a better look. It wasn't until we were practically on top of it that we realized that it was a dummy. We had wandered all the way up to the edge of a big Christmas tree farm's property, and the dummy was part of their decorations from a haunted hayride thing they did. They must have forgotten about it when closing up for the year. We had a good laugh, but we were all scared shitless for a few minutes.
All right, this one is from Psychological Butts. I work in the bush, and sometimes spend months out there. Most terrifying was seeing a bear start to circle me right as the helicopter pilot radioed me to say he couldn't get to my location because of the weather. Luckily, I had a shotgun with me, and eventually the pilot got down to me. But yeah, sitting there in the sleet while watching that grizzly slowly and sneakily try to cut around my position in the fading light was absolutely terrifying. The whole time I was trying to come up with a possible way to keep from being outflanked and to keep visual contact with it in case I had to shoot it. This was in the late fall, so the bear probably hadn't put on enough fat for the year and was looking to supplement it. Spooky stuff. I would never want to
supplement it with you, man.
I would never want to be eaten alive. That sounds horrible.
Sounds like a mild inconvenience at best.
Seems like a permanent inconvenience.
It is the inconvenience of ending all inconveniences. All right, this comes from Bionic Gimpster. I was backpacking with my dog, and about 12 miles from the road and trailhead, so pretty far from people, though popular enough that other hikers might be around, though we saw nobody all day. At about 2 a.m., my dog started this really low, deep growl, and he wakes me up. I turn on my headlamp and see his teeth showing, and he's right on top of me. I hear heavy footsteps, black bear, moose, near the tent. I leash my dog so he doesn't tear through the tent and the footsteps move further away, but they keep circling my tent. All of my food and my toiletries are hung in a tree in a bear bag, nothing in the tent to draw the bear's attention. I clap my hands. Something is still slowly circling. Not something a moose would do, and a bear might if he wanted food. But I've got nothing and a really big dog with me. I decide that I'm going to step out of the tent with the leash in one hand and bear spray in the other, yelling, "Hey, bear!" All I saw was a man saying, "You better leave."
What am I missing?
I just made that shit up. The footsteps stop. Dog's nose is in the air telling me to look right, but nothing is in my headlamp that I can see. I didn't hear anything run off. It's just quiet. I give it 5 minutes or so, and then I get back into the tent. Then it starts up again, slowly circling maybe 50 feet away from me. Maybe an hour later, I hear the footsteps wander off into the woods. At dawn, I take the dog and the bear spray, and I start looking for tracks. I find a clear path in the leaves that had been trampled, but no tracks. The dog's nose is on the ground, and I follow his lead. And he follows the loop around our campsite. We finally see a few human footprints. Not shoe tracks, a regular size, not Bigfoot, bare human foot. Plus, a human turd in toilet paper. Some asshole was wandering around the middle of nowhere near the tent and circling my tent for an hour or more and left a dump for me to find. That's like got to be the best camping prank I've ever heard of. I'm just going to go find a campsite and circle and then take a shit here.
That's pretty funny, man.
So that's it, man. Guy gets spooked and walks out and finds a human poop.
The old Cleveland steamer. All right, this one is from Azel M. I was wild camping and testing out my new hammock. I usually take my dog with me, but as it was a new hammock, I thought I'd go solo. I set up just before it got dark. I couldn't get comfortable in it for the life of me, so I get on the ground. I'm in the UK, so nothing will eat me. Stupid o'clock in the morning, and my dog is sniffing my ear. I thought, what the fuck is he trying to do? It's way too early. I remember my dog is at home, and I bolt upright, turn on a torch, and I see the back end of a small badger running away. Must have been young. In the morning, I see all the signs of a badger run that I was right in the middle of. No idea how I didn't notice it before. I don't know what a badger run is, but it sounds like he camped out on a little badger trail.
Badgers are mean, man. I would not fuck with a badger. Okay, this comes from Sky the Great. Backpacking the Maryland-Pennsylvania section of the Appalachian Trail around the age of 17. 4 of us were sleeping under a tarp that was tied up with paracord, so we only had protection from the rain. I'm guessing that around 2 a.m. I'm woken up by hearing branches breaking and movement nearby. Nothing out of the normal. This time of year, the worst it could have been is a lone, curious black bear, and they don't really pose any real threat. The sounds start getting closer and more rhythmic. Definitely something walking. I turn on my side to see if I can see anything, and as the walking is getting closer, I start to see movement in the leaves with nothing making it. I perfectly hear a person walking towards us and eventually making its way around our makeshift shelter. I'm freaking out and lay in complete silence for what felt like an eternity until my friend lying next to me finally says, "You heard that shit too, right?" Nearly jumped out of my sleeping bag, but also confirmed I didn't dream the entire thing. I still have no explanation, and I'm half convinced we just had a collective fever dream. On a non-paranormal sense, and way scarier than what I typed above, I was stalked by a mountain lion in the Rockies a few years ago. The unease that turns into full terror when you realize what's happening. Then fighting every instinct not to run like a mofo is a unique experience. Having that primal feeling that you are prey is fucking terrifying.
Yeah, again, I do not want to be eaten alive. That sounds horrible.
And the crazy thing is mountain lions, dude, they scream. Like, you've heard a mountain lion scream, right? That's intense.
Yeah.
And they will stalk you for miles.
I'm well aware of how that scream sounds. This one is from Ben Japal. I was camping on the Deschutes River by myself one night. It was the middle of the week, so I had the campground to myself. There isn't another human being within 5 miles. I drink a few beers as the sun goes down in the canyon. Cloudy night, so no stars and no moon. No campfire since it was well into fire season. Combined with the clouds, this made it essentially pitch black. It's dark, and no one can see me. So I put on some headphones and start dancing around my campsite like a Woodstock hippie when my nose catches a faint whiff of something awful. I take my headphones off and hear nothing, and before I can turn my headlamp on, I hear a big thundering of hooves, feet, paws, feel like a huge whoosh of wind around 2 feet in front of my face, then a loud crash into the bushes next to my campsite. Before whatever had jumped through the bushes even hit the ground, I had ran to my truck, laid down in the trunk, and locked all the doors. I didn't move for the rest of the night. Slept in my vehicle, held like 5 beers worth of pee until daylight. That's rough. I would have just peed out the window, man. When I wake up in the morning, all I can see is a small bit of blood on the tongue of my boat trailer. Some sort of prints in the dirt. A giant 5-foot diameter hole in the bushes next to my camp. To this day, I have no idea what happened. My hypothesis is that a deer wandered into the campsite and saw me being oblivious, dancing like a fool. But when I stopped moving, it got spooked and tried to run into a bush. Might have nicked itself on the trailer as it jumped over it. I don't think my life was ever in danger, but it was terrifying not knowing what it was. Makes it even worse.
All right, this comes from God P 1301. I was hunting in a small rustic log cabin out in the woods. The cabin was like a semi-detached house and could accommodate 2 small groups of hunters. Basically 2 10 by 10 rooms including a diner table and 2 twin beds. No water or electricity, only a small propane lamp as the light source. I arrived alone late in the afternoon. I saw a car parked already, so I figured my neighbors were already there. I started to unpack everything, and then cracked a cold beer sitting on the front porch. The sun was almost gone. I noticed that there was no light coming out of my neighbor's only door, so I thought they weren't back from their hunting day yet. Then it started. I heard a grown-ass man starting to cry. He was crying really loud like he lost something.
Oh my God. I'd definitely leave.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I'm going home. I'm done. I don't need this anymore. Jesus Christ, dude, what is this? He was crying really loudly like he had lost some family member or like his wife had left him. I started to feel really bad and I didn't know what to do. Then I realized that we were in the middle of nowhere and the only reason to be here was to hunt, which meant that he was surely armed. The crying was intense and wasn't stopping. It lasted for a good 15 minutes. I don't know what I do, man. That's just intense.
Hope you're okay.
I thought the guy was going to unalive himself at some point. It even crossed my mind that he may go on a killing spree. So I went back into my room. I closed the door and I started to make noise so that he would hear somebody and maybe stop crying so loud. It worked. I started to cook supper and when I started to eat, I started to hear new noises from my neighbor. I then realized that he was not alone. He was with a girl. They started to have really loud sex, but it wasn't sounding really sexy. More like someone that tries to kill a boar with his bare hands.
It's like the Pillsbury Doughboy getting poked a little too hard.
I really felt uncomfortable as I knew that they knew I was there and they did not care at all. So I took off with my camera and tripod and walked a while, staying to take pictures of the starry night to change my mind. Fortunately, at that time, another vehicle arrived. It was the hunters from the other unoccupied camp that they were arriving late. That third camp was another single building a few yards away from mine and my next-door neighbors. They invited me in for a drink, and I told them what had just happened to me. They invited me to stay with them for the night. The next day, the weird neighbors were just gone. A maintenance employee I met told me that they had left. He also told me he was the one who registered them and gave them the key. He told me he had never seen such an odd couple. What a weird camping trip, man.
Yeah, a lot of crying.
It's like random crying and then like sex. It sounds like you're wrestling a hog.
Boar love. This one's from Vast Celebration 717. Let's move along.
Let's move along.
I have a honey hole. Well, this gentleman has a honey hole about 3 miles deep in the National Forest area where I hunt. Usually get dropped off and hike in for the weekend. Hogs, white-tailed deer, black bears, panthers are all in the area. I've grown up around it, so there isn't much I haven't seen there. Last November, I make the trek back in there and set up my hammock and get ready to camp out for the night so I can hunt from sunup to sundown. I lay down and maybe 10 minutes later, hear the most blood-curdling scream not far off. It's not curdling, they said curling.
Blood curling.
Yeah, that's
really curls the blood, man.
That's what they wrote.
You hate it when your blood starts to curl.
There was no D in that word. But anyways, bobcats, foxes, and limpkins can all sound like screaming. But this was different. There was something about it that just didn't feel right. I sat up and grabbed my binoculars and started scanning the edge of the swamp. Caught a glimpse of what looked like a shape of a woman running full speed away from something around 200 yards out. Now, mind you, I'm a good few hours' walk from a paved road. Hell, even the service dirt road is maybe a little over a mile behind me, and she's going in the clear opposite direction. Only thing out there is the woods, and eventually the river. Put down the binoculars and grabbed my rifle so I could use the scope if she was being chased by a bear or a panther. Didn't see a damn thing. Absolutely nothing. Brushed it off as something my mind made up. The sun was setting, so I decided to get some rest. Went to sleep, clutching my rifle a little tighter than usual. Woke up the next morning and decided to check the spot where I thought I saw her running. Found smallish bare footprints in the mud. Packed my shit up quick, fast, and in a hurry. Haven't been back since. Sounds like he should have tried to help. Why was he scared? I don't understand. I was so scared.
This comes from Worthless Commotion. My husband, kid, and I live out in the middle of nowhere on a plot of land that's about 100 acres. I'd say probably 95 of those acres are wilderness with ATV and hiking trails that we and several of the previous owners created by exploring. We use that land for camping, hiking, and hunting. We like to find a spot, clear it a bit, and then camp overnight. There's so much space that we've never stayed in the same place twice. Sounds a little bit like a flex.
Yeah, we're really happy for you, man.
We've seen some kill sites, both old and fresh. Lots of animal tracks, places where deer bed down, etc. I've even spent a lot of time hiking solo while the kid is in school and husband's at work. You never hike solo. Whether alone or with the family, we always carry a firearm for protection. A few weeks ago, we decided to load up our camping gear and start a new trail. We marked the trails that we make with spray paint on the trees. We were pretty far into the woods, having hiked almost an hour, when the atmosphere seemed to have changed. I don't know who noticed it first, but my husband, who was leading the three of us, turned around and gave me a concerned look. The birds had stopped chirping. The insects were dead quiet. There were no sounds around us. When in the woods, complete quietness is rarely a good thing. That'd be terrifying. We continued onward, hyper aware of our surroundings, while our kid continued merrily talking. We came to the stream that marks the midway point of our property. We stopped for a few minutes, my husband and I in a stare down with each other. We both felt something was off, but we didn't want to scare our daughter. I finally broke the silence and said that I suddenly didn't feel good and that we should go home. My husband nodded in agreement while our daughter voiced her protest. Too bad, kiddo. We turned around and we started back. After going a few hundred yards, still in the silent wilderness, I looked to my right and saw a person crouched down in a ghillie suit about 150 feet off of our trail.
What the fuck?
That's not good. I'm positive they saw that I noticed them, but they never moved. I cleared my throat to get my husband's attention, and when he looked back, I put my hand on the gun in the holster on my hip, which caused him to readjust his rifle in preparation for anything. I sped my family up and we hurried back home. I told my husband as soon as we were inside. We decided to call the police and report the trespasser. Filed a report and was told to call again if we saw anybody. A few days later, my husband and I went out alone and set up a bunch of deer cams. We didn't go back out into the woods for maybe a week. Then he and I ventured out to retrieve the camera footage. Out of the 9 cameras we placed, we caught a person in a ghillie suit in 2 separate images. We handed copies over to the cops to go with our report. We haven't gone out since, except to check the deer cams. Haven't gotten any other trespassers. It freaks me out even more to think of the few times while camping that we heard walking near our tent in the middle of the night. We always assumed it was a curious animal, but now I'm not so sure.
That's creepy, dude.
Like a full-on fucking ghillie suit? Like, that guy is definitely up to something fucking weird, man.
Yeah. This one is from Go Think Outside. My son was 18 months old and strapped to my chest in a carrier. We were on our weekly walk into the woods outside of my town around 7 a.m. I was about 2 miles in when I started hearing heavy sounds to my right, maybe 30 yards off. Something large moving through the underbrush. I couldn't see any movement. I figured it was a deer or hog and kept moving. Not too concerned until I realized we were being followed. For 20 minutes we continued, my son strapped to my chest. The whole time we saw the same heavy movement kept our pace. I let the dog off the leash in case we needed to move quickly. Then our path turned sharply to the right around a bend of trees, and there, standing on the trail 25 yards in front of me, was a full-grown mountain lion. He turned his large body towards me and looked right at me. I froze in fear and in surprise. He made eye contact with me and we stared at each other for a moment. When he turned his head away from me, I started backing up, walking backwards. The dog was down the trail behind me and had never saw the mountain lion. I continued walking backwards until I was back around the bend and we were out of eyesight of each other. Then I turned and hauled out of there as quick as I could. It took 20 minutes moving fast to get out of the woods, all the time listening for something large keeping my pace and not knowing if we were being pursued. Those are the most terrifying 20 minutes I have ever had in any woods anywhere. It took me months before I was able to get back in there.
This comes from Popcorn Kernels 321. I'm not necessarily an outdoorsman, but I want to contribute with my story. When I was in the 5th grade, around 10 years old at the time, female, my friends and I would walk kind of far from our house to this small patch of woods that sat in the middle of some farm property. The woods were surrounded by cornfields, but at this time of the year, the corn was crumbled, dead, and pushed on the ground so it was easy to walk through. We would see deer and wild turkeys back there, which was fun for us being little tomboys that we were. Anyway, we would hang out in the woods and be completely oblivious to the very clearly marked hangout spot someone had made. Like there was an old couch that looked like somebody, maybe some homeless person, would crash on, and we would find poop that looked like human poop on the ground. It's about these people just shitting everywhere, man. Whatever, we didn't care, and continued to explore that area, which was huge. One day, me and my best friend, 11, female, explored the area for a bit, and as we were leaving, walking through the surrounding field, 2 boys our age ran towards us, screaming. I could hear the one boy say, "He's trying to kill you," and "He's gonna hit you." These kids were pretty far away, and it was hard to make out what they were saying. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a motorcycle. I turn, and I see a kid on a 3-wheeler coming right toward me. He's headed straight at me, and I just froze. Let me tell you, I could not move. My friend ran towards the boys trying to get away, and I'm literally petrified standing in a field. Then I see his face. He looked completely dead in his eyes. Then he fucking hit me and snagged my left leg. Just like running kids over in this fucking cornfield. What a monster. My entire body flew horizontally, if that makes sense. When I hit the ground, it was like I was sliding into home plate. What?
Small towns, man. It gets boring. You gotta make your own entertainment.
You know what's really fun? You just fucking run over kids with a 3-wheeler in the cornfield. I just slid on the ground for a while before realizing what happened. The kid on the 3-wheeler disappeared, and the boys ran towards me. I recognized the one kid from my school when he noticed that I had blood on my sneaker, and he pulled up my pant leg, revealing a nasty gash. The next thing I know, my mom is there. I get rushed to the hospital where my leg gets stitched up. I later find out that the kid who hit me was special needs, and his cousin, a kid named Mikey who had a crush on me but I couldn't stand, sent him after me to kill me. Apparently Mikey was bitter that I wouldn't be his girlfriend and literally sent his cousin to hurt me. Mikey had a rough reputation in our area, and I wonder if Mikey was the one who made camp in those woods. Maybe he was watching me and my friends. I don't know, but Mikey years later killed himself, which was a sad shock. And I have a scar on my leg from the ordeal. Man, that's intense.
All right, this one is from T-Bagalomaniac. I had a bear approach my tent one night while my girlfriend and I were sleeping during a 7-day through hike. When you're sleeping deep in the woods, it's frequently the case that you hear little sounds that seem like big things. Then you worry a little as to whether or not what you're hearing is a big animal. With this sound, on this night, there was absolutely no doubting that what I was hearing was a large animal, and it was coming straight for my tent. All my food was hung in a tree nearby, but he must have smelled us. Not only did he come right up to the tent, but he started to sniff at the edge of it. We could hear him sniffing. At this point, we were still both in our sleeping bags. My girlfriend was petrified. I banged on the side of the tent and yelled real loud. The bear ran off in the woods. A few minutes passed, and we heard him clomping through the bush, headed straight back to our tent. Then there was more sniffing, right at the exact corner he had sniffed at before. We yelled again, and off he went running back into the woods. By this point, I've had enough. I grabbed the bear spray, climbed to my feet, barefoot and butt naked, with only my headlamp and glasses on. I was asleep with my contacts out. I got out of the tent as quickly as I could. When I stood up, I immediately saw his eyes off in the distance. When you're wearing a headlamp, animals' eyes reflect directly back at you, but all you see are 2 bright spots. I picked up a stick and hurled it in his direction while yelling, and he ran off. This was all on a section of a PCT in Washington. I was deep in the wilderness, but there were other campers at the lake that we were at. Wouldn't you know it, the other campers started cheering for my goofy, naked ass. I chased a bear away while shoeless and butt naked in the middle of the night. Naked man scares away a bear.
Okay, this comes from Cozy. About 10 years ago, I was hunting. I was in a stand a good 4th mile or so from any road, surrounded by trees and brush. It was getting dark, and while there was some light, there wasn't enough to see anything in the woods, so I decided to get out of the stand and start walking up a game trail that I had come down while I could still see enough of the trail to walk out. I got about 100 yards up the trail when it happened. Off to my right, not far from the trail, I heard this horrible sound, like a cross between a baby crying and a woman screaming. It has been virtually silent in the woods, and the sudden scream was just piercing to my ears. Immediately following the scream, the brush about 10 yards from me shook violently, and the creature took off down through the woods along the trail in that direction I had just come from. I never saw it, only saw some of the brush moving as it ran. Well, my gun was immediately up as I had no idea what I just saw, and my mind was racing at about 1,000,000 miles a second. I took off up the trail as fast as I could walk, rifle at the ready in case whatever that thing was decided to come back my way. I made it to the road where my quad was parked and immediately jumped on, trying to start it. The only issue was the quad refused to start. In the back of my head, I was pissed more than scared at this point because I kept thinking, I'm gonna die in the most stereotypical horror movie way, and that really pissed me off. Finally, after several minutes, the quad started and I rushed back to camp as quickly as I could. I later found out, after talking to several of the other guys at the camp, that what I ran into was a bobcat, virtually harmless to humans unless you corner them or something. Turns out they have an absolutely terrifying scream, and if you're bored, I certainly recommend looking up videos of it because it's freaky. Unfortunately for me, this was my first encounter with one, and I was not thrilled with the experience.
All right, this one is called I Tried, Mate. A few years back, I went camping with other groups of friends for one of their birthdays at one of the national parks in the U.S. We set up camp near a hiking trail and decided to go for a hike. We were gone for about an hour and worked up an appetite, so we started cooking. As I was getting stuff ready to make something, I hear a pretty loud clap noise. I looked over and see an old man, about 70 years old, had punched my friend directly in the face, sending their glasses flying about 6 feet back. As I made eye contact with him, he shouted, "I'm Jesus Christ, kick my ass." My friends, who just got punched, is in shock. My other friend is frozen with fear. I decided to go hands-on, taking him to the ground and holding him on the ground. While I'm handling Jesus, I tell my frozen friend to call the police. Thankfully, he was able to get a hold of the police, who transferred him to the park rangers. About 20 minutes pass, and the police finally arrive. As they came up to us, one of them says, "Oh, it's him again," referring to Jesus. The police arrest him and tell us that he's come out here a few times because he believes that the stars are going to fall and destroy the earth soon. They also explained that he keeps getting off his medications.
I am Jesus Christ. Kick my ass.
By
What
far,
do you do at that point?
you gotta hit him. Just kidding.
You gotta hit him. You have an obligation to punch Jesus in the face.
By far the most terrifying experience we had. To make it even bittersweet, the friend who was punched, it was his birthday that day.
Oh, happy birthday to you, man.
Birthday punch.
All right, we're going to end with this one, the laughing cactus. And it starts with, "Oh man, here we go. My time to shine. This happened only a few weeks ago. I live close to the Angeles National Forest. There are some trails within walking distance from my home that take you up into those mountains. It was a very foggy evening, and having just received some bad news over the phone, I wanted to clear my mind with a night hike. I set off at around 8 o'clock. Sad boy music in my earbuds and a camelback with water and supplies. I didn't plan to be out too long, but I was definitely going to be out for a while. The hike started off great, and the fog was almost sort of a novelty, very eerie and calm in a neat sort of way. The only sounds came from water dripping off of the plants along the mountainside. Nobody was around, and it felt like I had the mountains to myself. I was hiking without using my flashlight, as it was like driving. High beams of light cut my visibility from about 20 feet to 10 feet. Shining a light would be like facing a wall of whiteness, and it would kill my night vision. After about an hour, things started getting weird. It was maybe 2.5 miles up the trail, and the only light came from the glow of the city behind me. It was getting darker the further I got up and into the mountains. I started smelling smells? Synthetic.
Yeah, meth.
First, it was perfume for a few seconds. Just a whiff. I couldn't see more than 15 feet or so in front of me at that point, so I was kind of like, kind of odd. The second smell was that of campfire, which was also odd, as there weren't any campgrounds nearby. I shrugged it off, and I kept going. I then got a whiff of a plant that brought me back to my childhood, as it reminded me of smelling it during summers when I would play outside with my friends. I wasn't too off-put, but it was indeed a bit strange. A bit later, I noticed a dull flash out of the corner of my eye. It was light coming from a flashlight, but it was above me on the ridge, maybe 50 or 100 feet up. Looked like a glow in the clouds, sort of like how a plane looks flying through a cloud. It would get brighter, dimmer, based on the direction. To my knowledge, though, there weren't any trails there. Super weird. I took my earbuds out and I listened. Still silence except for the light. The light would turn on, sweep, then turn off. Then turn on and shine in a different direction, like somebody was looking for something. I assumed they were having the same visibility problems that I was. I had stopped completely, and watched as the light would continue to turn on and off and move slowly along the ridge. I kept my earbuds out now, and I was just telling myself it was another hiker. I waited for it to pass above me and kept on. After maybe 10 minutes, I heard whistling, sort of like somebody calling a dog, but from a distance. I looked back, and while I was unable to orient myself due to the fog, the whistling was coming from the light that I could now see was across the canyon that I had been walking along. In terms of distance, it was probably about 1/6 of a mile, just a faint glow through the fog. I watched it for a minute, then kept moving. After maybe another hour and a half, I stopped for some water. The trail had turned from dirt to the sandy, crunchy soil. It had only gotten darker, and I was around 3,200 feet in elevation, so the city lights were not as bright anymore. I noted that my footsteps were the loudest thing out here, which was a bit unsettling. The trail twists and turns along the mountainsides, and there would be these scenic viewpoints at the turns that would give you maybe 50 feet or so to go off trail and to look over the edge into the valley. I was about 4.5 miles out at this time, tracking with my watch, so I went out to the edge of the closest view to assess if I wanted to keep going or not. I felt great, and although my cell service had been spotty, I was trying to look at some maps to see what was ahead of me and maybe pick a turnaround point. I was also getting texts now that hadn't been able to deliver since my service was in and out, so I wanted to check those too. I'm at the edge of the view, and someone had made a little rock sculpture thing with a weird stick. I was just chilling out there for maybe 2 minutes or so and looking at the sculpture. I can't see the trail because of the fog and the darkness, but I know where it is based on direction. Here's where it gets absolutely terrifying. Oh, now we're just getting to the terrifying piece. I pull out my phone to check my texts one last time before setting off, and as soon as I look down at my phone, I hear 5 very fast footsteps from the direction of the trail. This was the sound that my feet made because of the soil, and I recognized it immediately. I instantly looked in that direction and they stopped, completely, dead silent. I scrambled to get my flashlight knife out of my bag versus using my phone light and fists and shined in that direction. A wall of fog and silence. The footsteps were not a gallop or the skittering of an animal. It was the footsteps of something running at me on 2 legs that stopped on a dime. I could feel the terror rising in my chest as I stood there frozen. I was alone, in the dark, up in the mountains, and something was up here with me. I stood there for maybe 2 minutes with the light facing that direction. The biggest problem was that they came from the direction of the trail that I needed to get back to. I thought, fuck this, I'm heading back. I slowly approached the trail and walked through where the sound came from and began to head back down. For maybe the next 20 minutes, every 2 minutes or so, I would quickly stop and shine the light behind me. I could have sworn maybe 2 or 3 times I heard an extra step in the distance behind me, like something was matching my footfalls to remain undetected. I was fast walking now as the visibility was still too poor to run, and I was worried I'd twist an ankle. I kept my light on the whole time and had my knife out in my other hand. After maybe 30 minutes or so, I heard something crash through the brush on my right, which was the steep side of a canyon. Again, I cannot see anything because of the fog. I moved to the other side of the trail and kept going. Let me tell you, that was the most determined I've been to make it down a trail. I heard other weird sounds coming along the way, but I ignored them and I kept moving. I will never forget that night. I night hiked one more time on the same trail, but it was clear. I had a headlamp on the whole time and a much bigger knife on my side. I also ran back down when I reached my turnaround point. All right, we're going to end there for tonight. Thank you, folks, for joining us tonight. Thank you to our paid supporters of the show, Soylent Cleat, Modelo Time, Cleat Feet, Curtis and Lara, Mothman, Lara, Conklin Family, and Lou. Your paid support of the show is tremendously helpful, and if you yourself would like to become a paid supporter of the show, click the link down below, and there's several tiers to choose from, as well as if you want to make a one-time donation to the beer fund of the show, there's a link for that as well.
If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe, as it really helps us get us out there. And as always, thank you for entering the abyss.
Until next time.